Yo, what is going on, you guys? So today I'm bringing guys a brand new sports cards video. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down some cards that have absolutely tanked recently and whether I believe now is a good time to buy in, buy the dip, or whether I believe it's a time to get out of these players and move your money into a better place. So without further ado, let's hop right into the video. All right, guys. So the first player on our list is none other than Will Levis. A lot of his cards preseason were very, very hyped. We could see, for example, his Purple Prism in a PSA 10, this card out of 125. Before the season, we saw some sales as high as $420. We saw many sales in the $400 range, and that card's currently down to $66. We see his cards down nearly 90% over the last 90 days. So this card, obviously, along with many other Will Levis cards, are currently sitting at, roughly 10 to 30% of their all-time highs. I think Will Levis, he hasn't had the most horrible year, but he has obviously not taken the jump that people had expected him to. And, he hasn't shown the consistency that I think a lot of people have expected him to. And I think his cards right now are currently at a place where I still think they're too risky for me to get in. I do see them. You can never write off a player, especially this young, who's still in their second season, who hasn't fully had that opportunity on a solid team. However, the hope really starts to go down over time. And I think it just gets to a point where it's super risky. This card, if he somehow pans out, there's a lot of guys who pan out later in their career, like Sam Darnold, or other players along those lines, who it takes them longer to really adjust and get in the right situation. But for every player that pans out in the long run who didn't pan out at first, there's many players such as Trey Lance who haven't they haven't seen the opportunity yet. Maybe they're just backing up another quarterback, and their cards could continue to suffer. So for Will Levis, I'm personally not a buyer, in Will Levis's market. However, there is less risk if you're buying in now compared to preseason, where the hype was up here, because his cards are currently at an 80% around discount. So if you are a believer, it's not the worst risk reward ratio just because it's already come down 80%. Could it come down another 80%? Definitely, if he doesn't pan out over the next couple of years. But there is more upside than there was before the season. I think expectations are piped down a lot, which is healthy for someone like Will Levis's market. I think this is more properly priced than what his cards were preseason. And I think that's the same boat for a lot of other young players like Anthony Richardson and Bryce Young. They haven't had the worst years. What more can you expect from a second-year player on teams like the Panthers, the Colts, the Titans? I think a lot of people had super high expectations, and that's why we saw their prices so high. So I think now is a good time where prices are super, super low compared to where they were, to take a look at a lot of these quarterbacks who haven't performed, and see which ones you think could bounce back. I think I personally am not investing in these players nor recommending people to. However, if you are one of those guys who's buying up here at $178 for a pink optic Anthony Richardson, when you see them currently down at $30, $20, you could see upside if he does, have a bounce back year next year, if he does figure things out. It's just, at least you're buying in at a discount. However, I personally think it's a little bit too risky. It's definitely more of a coin flip, but your odds are better than they were before the season, because before the season, you're buying in with super high expectations, with prices at all-time highs for these players. And right now you have 80% discounts. So for the long term, I don't know if this couple months of play is going to mean so much to his long-term market. So if you were one of those guys who believed in him at 1,500, I think, if you're looking at these great discounts, I'm not saying it could be an opportunity, but it at least is better odds than before, I would say. Now, next up on the list, we're going to go with Tua. I know I talked about him in my last video. Tua is one of those guys who right now his career is seeming pretty fragile due to his injuries. Every single head injury he has, there's questions on whether his career will be over. There's a lot of fear in his market. We've seen a lot of his, especially his higher end cards, have really come down in price. For example, cards like these that were right before the season, $5,200, currently $2,000. So we've seen a lot of his cards come down a lot in value. I just personally haven't seen from Tua what I would be hoping to see by now, especially with Tyreek, with Jalen Waddle, with his team, with his weapons, with Shane. I just haven't seen that yet, and I think it could be reaching a point where, his market is just very depleted. I think his market is lacking a lot of buyers. I think his market has become more of a collector's market for Dolphins fans as opposed to investors. And I think that's what scares me a little bit in his market. So I personally would not be a buyer in Tua. There's, of course, a chance he turns his career around and he, is able to take that big jump. I just think it's a little bit late and risky to where if he would have taken that jump, I think it could have happened already if he was destined to take that jump. And we've seen his market clearly react to it. I mean, his National Treasures, this card in a PSA 9 was almost a $10,000 card before the season. And it's currently around a $2,000 card. So some super, super brutal losses there. And I just don't know if I see a great future in Tua's market. Now, next up, we're going to go with someone on the basketball side who's a little bit more surprising, but none other than Jayson Tatum. Jayson Tatum, his market, of course, is not quite down 90%. But I've gotten asked a lot about Jayson Tatum's market and Jaylen Brown's market just because of him winning a championship and his market not really going up much. And I think a lot of that is because his expectations were priced in and his stats weren't quite there. If you look across his market, it's still quite low compared to a lot of other young stars. And his pop counts are fairly lower compared to other more recent stars. The reason also that I don't believe Jayson Tatum's market has been reacting too much to his dominance on the court and to the Celtics' dominance on the court is due to the fact that he's a 2017 rookie now, which is now 7 years ago. So a lot of people are kind of, I wouldn't say doubting, but a lot of people are not as excited about Jayson Tatum as a younger star like Victor Wembanyama, or even guys like Anthony Edwards who are more fresh onto the scene. I think Tatum's been in the scene for long enough to where the hype doesn't really generate. Throughout the offseason after winning a championship, you just don't see his cards really change in price too much because there's no real new influx in buyers. I think everyone kind of knows that the Celtics are one of the best teams, and Tatum is, of course, a star in this league. But I think he's just lacking either that superstar ability to where he could potentially be known, because at the end of the day, people are buying into these cards for him to be potentially known as one of the best players of all time. I think every young star people invest in, they're looking for that factor of them being one of the all-time greats, because you see so many guys with Hall of Fame careers whose prices are just not doing too well. Even guys like Tim Duncan, guys like Allen Iverson, super collectible players, super great players on the court, but they were not, you could say Tim Duncan was an all-time great, but he just wasn't as fun to watch and didn't have as much collectability. But even guys like Allen Iverson, who such a great player, such a strong fan base, he just, didn't quite have that resume. And I think Tatum's market right now is still just super soft. And I think it's going to go two ways. Either the Celtics are going to create a dynasty and win multiple championships, and then he's going to get the respect, similar to what we saw with Nikola Jokic. Nobody wanted to buy his cards until he had to really earn it with multiple MVPs and then a finals MVP, and then people gave him that respect, and his cards started to go up a lot. And I think we're kind of in that similar boat with Tatum, where it's like he's not super collectible. He doesn't quite, in many people's eyes, doesn't quite have that top 3 player in the league mentality or, potential. I personally, love Jayson Tatum as a player. I just don't know if he's the best investment because he's a 2017 rookie, and it's going to take a lot more from him than some hype. If this was 2018, 2020, when he was fresh out the gate, there's upside because he's young and he's exciting to watch. But I think right now he's kind of, I wouldn't say the old story, but it's like we need something new from him. And I think multiple championships could do that. It could be a good buying opportunity to buy the dip, but there is that risk that if the Celtics don't end up being a dynasty, I don't know if Tatum's market is going to perform well at all. Now, next up on this list is none other than Zion Williamson. Zion, I am on consulting calls a lot for my program, and a lot of times people ask me, especially people who came into the hobby during the pandemic time, um, they'll ask me, what do I do with my Zion cards? Of course, they're down an insane amount over the last 3 years, last 4 years, I should say, but they just keep going down. We're not seeing much hope. We see slight increases now and then, but overall, the main issue with Zion has just been he's not been able to stay healthy in his career. And it doesn't look like he's going to have a long career playing at the highest level at this rate. And I think that's become the biggest concern with Zion. I think his risk is pretty much like betting on whether he gets injured or not. And so far, the answer has been he hasn't been able to stay healthy. The Pelicans in general have not been able to stay healthy. And I think hype is really, really dying down on Zion's market. Every single offseason, we see a little bit of an uptick, like, oh, maybe this is his year. And then soon into the year, we see people realize it's another year of the same thing. And I think that's what we've currently seen. This card had some excitement at $400 in the offseason again, and it's back down to $200. And every year it keeps getting worse and worse. And so I just think that's one of the biggest issues with Zion is, can we see that healthy year where he puts in great numbers and is able to turn his cards around? And personally, we haven't seen that yet. And I just think it's becoming riskier and riskier to be a part of Zion's market. So I would personally stay away. I wouldn't say he's the worst investment because of how low he is. However, I would say any money you have in Zion should be prepared to go to zero, because that could be the reality. If he has a couple more injuries, I think that's where we could be headed. So that's all we have today. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to drop a like and subscribe. But other than that, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'm out.